Hey guys, tonight we are traveling back to a time of dark forests and even darker ambitions. Imagine you're walking a path lit only by moonlight, deep in 17th century Germany, chasing a secret that promises to unlock life itself. It's a dangerous path, and let's be honest, you probably won't survive this particular story with your soul intact. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. It's a fortress, a bastion of power and history, and it is to be your home. The sight doesn't fill you with a sense of comfort, but with a low thrum of anticipation. This is the place. The place where the questions that burn inside, you might finally find their answers. The questions are dangerous ones, the kind that get men branded as heretics. You are chasing the secret of life itself, a goal that, historically speaking, has a pretty dismal success rate. But as you begin the final ascent, the cold air feels less like a burden and more like a whetstone, sharpening your resolve for the strange and perilous life that awaits you within those stone walls. Let us know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is cold. Not the crisp, clean cold of a modern winter night, but a heavy, damp cold that clings to your woolen cloak and seems to sink right into your bones. You pull the rough fabric tighter, the scent of wood smoke and wet earth filling your senses. Above, a sliver of moon does its best to cut through the thick canopy of the Odenwald, the ancient forest that blankets the hills of Hesse. Every snapped twig under your worn leather boot sounds like a cannon shot in the profound quiet. This is a land still nursing the deep, ragged wounds of the 30 Years' War, a conflict that ended just a few decades before your time, but whose ghosts still haunt every village and every shadowed valley. You can almost feel the memory of it in the air, a lingering sorrow, a deep-seated suspicion of strangers. You are walking toward a goal, a place that hums with a silent promise of knowledge. Out here, the world is a tapestry of folklore and faith. The local people, whose cottages you passed miles ago, they speak of the Walgiest, the spirit of the forest, in hushed tones. They leave out offerings to appease it, a practice that the church condemns, but dares not entirely stamp out. Historians still argue whether the era's burgeoning scientific minds were truly separate from these deep-rooted superstitions, or if they were merely trying to codify the world as magic with a new set of rules. For you, the rustling leaves aren't just wind, they are whispers. The shadows aren't just an absence of light, they are possibilities. It's a world without GPS, obviously, where the map inside your head is a blend of astronomical observation and pure, unadulterated gut feeling. Through a break in the trees, you see it. Perched on a high hill overlooking the town of Darmstadt, a silhouette of stone and shadow against the bruised purple sky. The great wooden doors groan shut behind you, the sound echoing down long stone corridors. The air inside is even colder than the forest, thick with the smell of centuries of dust, damp stone, and forgotten history. And it is into this world, in a chamber high in one of the castle's towers, that you are born. The date is August 1673, and your first cries are swallowed by the immense, indifferent silence of Castle Frankenstein. You feel a kinship with this ancient place. It is isolated, brooding, and filled with secrets, just like you. Looking out from the battlements, you see the world not as a place of commerce and politics, but as a grand, unsolved puzzle. Down there are the mundane lives of farmers and merchants. But up here, in the cold, thin air of your stone fortress, you feel the pull of the greater mysteries. The whispers of the dragon, the legends of hidden springs with miraculous powers, they aren't just stories. They are a call to adventure, a challenge to uncover the profound truths that you are certain lie just beneath the surface of reality. This is not a place of cozy domesticity. It's a fortress built for war and siege, and you can feel its stern, unyielding nature in the very stones around your cradle. Your childhood is one of echoes and drafts. You learn to walk on uneven flagstones, your small hands tracing the gritty texture of walls that have seen more than a dozen generations come and go. The castle itself is a character in your life story. Long before you arrived, it was already a place of myth. Locals whisper tales of Sir Arbogast, a knight of the Frankenstein line, who, centuries ago, battled a fearsome dragon that terrorized the nearby village of Niederbierbach. It's a classic bedtime story, really, complete with a heroic knight and a monstrous beast. The quirky little addendum to this local myth is that the dragon's blood was so corrosive that it created a patch of land where nothing would ever grow again. As a boy, you probably searched for that barren patch in the woods, half hoping to find it. This castle, your home, sits at the intersection of history and folklore. It was genuinely constructed in the mid-13th century by the Lords of Frankenstein, a strategic stronghold meant to dominate the surrounding landscape. Your days are spent exploring its secrets. You find spiral staircases leading to nowhere, peer through arrow slits at the sprawling Rhine plain below, and feel a shiver of something fear, or perhaps excitement in the deep, dark cellars. The local people view the castle and its inhabitants with a mixture of awe and suspicion. Scholars still disagree on how much these pervasive local myths actually influenced the day-to-day lives and beliefs of the castle as noble residents. Did your family laugh at the dragon stories? Or did they glance nervously into the woods on moonless nights, just in case? For you, the stories are more than just tales. They are evidence. Evidence that the world is a place of hidden wonders and terrible power, where the line between the natural and the supernatural is thin, almost transparent. You are a solitary child, more comfortable with the company of old books and the silent gaze of the stone gargoyles than with other children. The years pass as they do, and the stone walls of your childhood fortress eventually recede in the distance. You trade the isolation of the castle for the crowded, noisy, and intellectually charged atmosphere of the University of Gießen. While your classmates are diligently memorizing Greek conjugations and debating the finer points of transubstantiation, you find your attention wandering. Your thoughts drift not to heaven, but to the earth beneath your feet. By day, you are the theology student, nodding along to lectures on divine grace, a topic so abstract it makes your childhood dragon stories seem like well-documented zoological reports. By night, you are hunched over a flickering candle, poring over diagrams of alembics and charts of planetary alignments. You learn about the prima materia, the theoretical first matter from which all things are made. You read of the philosopher's stone, the mythical substance that can not only transmute lead into gold, but also grant eternal life. The pursuit of a comfortable parish posting holds zero interest for you. You aren't interested in saving souls one by one from a pulpit. You are becoming obsessed with saving the body, with unlocking the secrets of life and death itself. The university was meant to tame your mind, to shape it for a conventional life. Instead, it has only shown you the walls of the prison, and you are already planning your escape. To the secrets hidden within plants, minerals, and the very flesh and blood of living creatures. A legitimate historical practice of the era was the formal academic disputation, a public debate where students would defend a thesis on a theological point. You excel at these, your mind sharp and your tone quick. But your arguments often veer into strange territories, peppered with analogies from the natural world that make your professors exchange uneasy glances. You seem more interested in the mechanics of God's creation than in the purity of His Word. You are sent here to study theology, a respectable path for a young nobleman. It is expected that you will absorb the rigid Lutheran orthodoxy, learn the subtleties of Scripture, and perhaps one day become a respected minister or academic. You sit in cavernous, unheated lecture halls, the professor's voice a monotonous drone as he dissects dense theological arguments in Latin. The air is thick with the smell of old paper, stale robes, and the collective, low-grade anxiety of young men trying to secure their futures. It's a world of rules, of doctrines set in stone, where questioning the fundamentals is not just discouraged, it's a sin. But your mind, shaped by the wild folklore and brooding solitude of Castle Frankenstein, chafes against these intellectual chains. Your real education happens outside the lecture hall. You begin to haunt the city's dusty bookshops, your fingers tracing the spines of forbidden texts. These are not the approved works of the faculty. These are the writings of the alchemists, the mystics, the natural philosophers who sought not just to understand the world, but to change it. You discover the works of Paracelsus and Basil Valentine, men who saw the universe as a living organism, a divine chemical process. Their language is one of symbols, of metaphors, of a secret fire that animates all matter. Historians still argue whether your nascent interest in alchemy was a rebellion against religious dogma or an attempt to find empirical, hands-on proof for the spiritual truths you were being taught. Was it a rejection of God or a new, more intimate way of finding Him? You begin to lead a double life. The dissonance between your two lives grows from a low hum into a deafening roar. Each day spent listening to the dry rustle of theological pages feels like a betrayal of the vibrant, secret world you explore at night. One morning, you simply don't go to the lecture. You don't pack a large bag or write a dramatic farewell. For you, the distinction is meaningless. Why can't it be both? To perfect matter is to perfect spirit. As you walk, the formal Latin of your professors fades from your mind, replaced by the cryptic, symbolic language of the alchemists. You ponder the riddles written in decknamen, or cover names, where the green lion devours the sun and the gray wolf purifies the king. It's a deliberate obscurity, designed to protect the sacred art from fools and charlatans. You are no longer Johann Conrad Dippel, theology student. You are now a seeker, a philosopher by fire, a man who has traded the promise of heaven for a chance to build it right here on earth. You just gather the few precious forbidden books you've acquired, your quill and ink, and walk out of the university town without looking back. You are formally abandoning your career in theology. It's the 17th century equivalent of dropping out of law school to become a professional ghost hunter, a move that screams instability to everyone you know. You are answering the call of the great work, a magnum opus, the supreme and lifelong effort to create the philosopher's stone. This isn't a hobby anymore. It is your vocation. The arguments in the lecture hall seem to circle endlessly, abstract debates about the nature of grace, while the books you secretly devour speak of tangible things, of salt, sulfur, and mercury, of separating the subtle from the gross, of calcination, dissolution, and coagulation. You realize that you cannot serve two masters. The path of the theologian promises comfort, respectability, and a quiet life. The path of the alchemist promises, well, it promises nothing but toil and danger, but it holds the tantalizing possibility of everything. The decision, when it comes, feels less like a choice and more like a surrender to the inevitable. You are chasing a secret that has obsessed thinkers for over 1,000 years, the prima materia, or first matter. You believe that if you can find this primordial, formless substance, the raw essence from which God spun the entire universe, you can then perfect it. The tool for this perfection is the philosopher's stone. To you, it's not some magical pebble from a fairy tale. It's the ultimate catalyst, a substance of pure fire and light that can heal any imperfection. It can turn lead, a base and sick metal, into gold, the most perfect and healthy of metals. More importantly, you believe it can do the same for the human body, purging it of the sickness of old age and the final imperfection of death. It is the key to the elixir of life. It remains a subject of debate among scholars whether the gold sought by alchemists like you was always literal, or if it was sometimes a metaphor for spiritual perfection. the transmutation of a flawed soul into an enlightened one. Your wandering eventually brings you back to the familiar, brooding landscape of your youth. Not to the castle itself, that life is behind you, but to a nearby town where your family name still carries some weight. You need a space, a sanctuary, where you can begin your great work in earnest. You find it not in a grand tower, but in the opposite direction, down. The church is deeply suspicious of your kind of work, often equating alchemy with witchcraft and demonology. There's also the very real threat of theft, not of gold, but of secrets. The alchemical community was a strange mix of collaborative spirit and intense, paranoid rivalry. You spend your days and nights in this subterranean world, the only light from your furnace and a few flickering tallow candles. The outside world, with its church bells and market days, fades into a muffled dream. Your entire existence contracts to this stone-lined room, to the gentle bubbling in a flask, the hiss of the fire, and the cryptic promises of the ancient texts spread out on your workbench. This cellar is no longer just a room. It has become your universe. You secure a secluded cottage on the edge of town, its chief virtue being a deep, damp, and forgotten stone cellar. This will be your laboratorium, your place of prayer and work, your holy of holies. The space is small, the air still and musty, smelling of packed earth and sleeping spiders. It is perfect. With painstaking effort, you begin to assemble your arsenal. This is no sleek, modern chemistry lab. It's a chaotic jumble of earthen and glassware, a testament to hope and hard-won funds. There's the alembic, a two-part still for distillation, its swan-like neck designed to cool vapors back into liquid. There's the retort, a gourd-shaped flask used for reactions that release corrosive fumes. And there's the pelican, a peculiar circulatory distillation device with two curved arms that feed condensed liquid back into the main body. A visual metaphor for the serpent eating its own tail, the Ouroboros. A fascinating tidbit of alchemical lore is the alchemical egg, the sealed flask in which the prima materia was to be gestated. Some alchemists believed the glass had to be perfectly spherical to properly channel the cosmic energies. You spend days searching for the perfect one, holding each flask up to the light, looking for flaws. You acquire a furnace, the Athenor, which you lovingly construct from brick and clay. Alchemists called it the slow furnace because it was designed to maintain a gentle, constant heat for weeks, even months, mimicking the slow, nurturing warmth of a womb. Getting the heat just right is an art in itself, a constant battle against drafts and fuel shortages. You spend hours fanning the coals, your face smudged with soot, feeling more like a baker's apprentice than a philosopher. But knowing this slow, steady heat is the foundation of everything. Next come the vessels. You collect an array of glass and ceramic containers, each with a specific purpose and a poetic name. As you work, you seal the cellar's single window and stuff rags under the door. Secrecy is paramount. After months spent in the subterranean twilight of your laboratory, emerging into the world again is a physical shock. You blink in the sunlight like some pale creature of the deep, your eyes accustomed only to the flickering glow of the furnace. But this time, you're not lost in the crowd. You are the focus of its attention. On the stage opposite you is a respected professor of theology, a man whose entire career is built on the bedrock of the orthodoxy you now see as a cage. He begins the debate, his voice confident and sonorous, laying out a purely scriptural argument about the nature of the human soul and its divine separation from the corruptible flesh. You haven't won in the traditional sense, but you have achieved something far more significant. You have announced your arrival on the intellectual stage. By nightfall, your name is on everyone's lips. To a few, you are a visionary, a bold thinker pushing the boundaries of knowledge. To most, you are a heretic, a dangerous radical whose ideas threaten the very foundations of faith and social order. You walk away from the university for the second time, But now you are no longer an anonymous dropout. You are Johann Conrad Dippel, the brilliant and dangerous alchemist of Gießen. It is eloquent, it is predictable, and to you it is utterly and profoundly wrong. But you haven't been summoned from your work to discuss the weather. You have been challenged to a public disputation, a formal academic debate, and you have accepted. It's an opportunity to unveil the radical new philosophy you have been forging in fire and smoke. You travel back to Gießen, the very university you abandoned, not as a penitent student, but as an intellectual gunslinger ready for a showdown. You step into the great hall, and the air is just as stuffy as you remember, a potent cocktail of unwashed scholars and ancient books. Then it is your turn. You don't counter with scripture alone. You speak of the body as a chemical laboratory. You talk of the vital spirit, not as an abstract theological concept, but as a subtle fluid, an essence that can be separated and studied. Historians debate whether you intended to be purely provocative, or if you genuinely believed you could bridge the gap between faith and your emerging chemical philosophy. You take a deep breath and propose your most incendiary idea, that the soul is not merely a passenger in the body, but is bound to it by a chemical medium. And if it can be bound, you argue, it can be ... transferred. The implication hangs in the thick, dusty air. You are not just talking about medicine anymore. You are talking about the mechanics of life and death, suggesting they are not divine mysteries, but problems to be solved. A predictable thing happens when you suggest the human soul can be poured from a flask. People get upset. The professor is sputtering. The clergy in the front row looks scandalized, and a wave of shock and outrage ripples through the audience. You are championing the new and controversial field of iatrochemistry, the Paracelsian belief that medicine and the body are fundamentally chemical. The murmurs in the hall begin to shift from academic appreciation to uneasy confusion. You are mixing the sacred with the profane, the laboratory with the lecture hall. This is where you make your name. The disputation ends not with a polite conclusion, but with a chaotic uproar. The fallout from your fiery disputation is swift and severe. The label of heretic is not just a theological disagreement in your era. It's a social and legal death sentence. Your life is now a blur of dusty roads, creaking carriages, and nights spent in cheap, anonymous inns. You learn to sleep with one ear open, to gauge the mood of a town from the way people look at you in the market square. Your great work is perpetually interrupted. Historians debate whether this nomadic lifestyle was a tragic impediment to your work, ironically, the very thing that saved you. Had you stayed in one place, you almost certainly would have ended up in a dungeon or at the stake. By constantly moving, you stay one step ahead of your enemies. It's a miserable, precarious existence, but it's an existence nonetheless. You learn to carry your laboratory in your head. You refine your theories on long, lonely journeys, dreaming of a day you will find a safe harbor, a patron, and a new cellar where you can finally reignite the Aethoner's slow, secret fire. Every new city is a puzzle. Who holds power here? Is the local duke a devout traditionalist or a man with a curious mind? Is the clergy powerful or merely for show? You develop a sixth sense for danger and opportunity. One contemporary historical account mentions that you developed a habit of paying for your lodging a week in advance. A clever trick to reassure your landlord while ensuring you could vanish overnight without losing much money if things turned sour. The church authorities, once content to let you dabble in your strange pursuits, now see you as a direct threat. Your writings are condemned. Warrants are drawn up. The quiet life of a scholar, even a fringe one, is no longer an option. You are forced to pack what you can your most precious books, a few small instruments, and the clothes on your back and flee. This is the beginning of a new chapter in your life, not as a settled philosopher, but as a perpetual wanderer. You become a nomad, drifting across the fragmented map of the Holy Roman Empire and beyond. Your reputation, like a distorted shadow, both precedes and follows you. In some towns, the name Dipple is whispered with a kind of fearful respect. Students and fellow alchemists seek you out, hoping for a glimpse of your genius. They find you in dingy taverns, where you hold court, sketching diagrams on a beer-stained table and captivating your small audience with talk of universal solvents and the essence of life. But in other places, your name is a curse. Doors are slammed in your face. Priests preach against you from the pulpit, painting you as an agent of the devil, a man who would dissect the very soul of God. You are chased out of Strasbourg, then find a temporary and uneasy refuge in Berlin, only to be driven out again. This constant movement takes a toll. You can never stay in one place long enough to build a proper laboratory, to conduct the long, slow experiments that alchemy requires. After months on the road, your clothes are threadbare, and your purse is dangerously light. The life of a fugitive philosopher, it turns out, is not a lucrative one. You arrive in a new city let's call it a composite of the dozen places you tried your luck, like Berlin or Frankfurt, with nothing but your notorious reputation and a desperate need for a sponsor. Alchemy is an expensive business. The glassware, the rare minerals, the charcoal for the furnace, not to mention the basic need for food. You talk of new remedies, of ways to ensure the health of his lordship and his family, subtly stoking his fear of mortality. You must appear brilliant, but not so radical that you frighten him. Historians still puzzle over how you, a known heretic, managed to talk your way into so many of these high-stakes situations. Perhaps it was your genuine, fiery conviction that was so persuasive. You are not just acting. You believe every word you say. The patron, for his part, sees you as a gamble. If you succeed, he gains unimaginable wealth and glory. If you fail, well, he loses some money and gets a good story to tell. For you, the stakes are much higher. His patronage is your lifeline, your only chance to escape the road and get back to the real work, back to the fire. Then you pivot to wealth. You speak of the secrets of metallurgy, of improving the output of his mines, and you hint at the ultimate prize, transmutation. The idea of turning the lead from his mines into gold makes his eyes glitter with a greed that outshines the jewels on his fingers. A fascinating and quirky fact of the era is that many noble courts had an officially appointed alchemist, whose position was often as precarious as the court jester's. One successful demonstration could bring immense reward. One failure could mean the dungeon. And shelter, it all requires a steady stream of capital. And that kind of money in the 17th century comes from only one source, the rich and powerful. Your target is the local court, a glittering, treacherous ecosystem of aristocrats, military officers, and ambitious courtiers. Gaining access is your first challenge. You can't just knock on the palace gate. You have to work the angles. You spend your first few days in the city's intellectual hubs, the bookshops, the coffee houses, and the university halls. You let it be known, discreetly, that the controversial but brilliant Dipple is in town. You engage in debates. You share just enough of your provocative ideas to create a buzz, hoping that word will travel up the social ladder. Your name is your only currency, and you spend it wisely. Finally, you get your audience. You are ushered into a lavishly appointed room, the air thick with the scent of beeswax and perfume. Before you sits a duke, a prince, or perhaps a wealthy landgrave, a man bored with the tedious business of statecraft and hungry for diversion. These rulers were often the venture capitalists of their day, willing to fund risky projects in the hopes of a spectacular return. You know that you have to tailor your pitch perfectly. This is not the place for dense theological arguments. You have to speak their language. Power, wealth, and prestige. You begin not with alchemy, but with medicine. You are walking a razor's edge. You must promise enough to capture his imagination, but not so much that you seem like a common charlatan. Your patroness gold has bought you something far more precious than security. It has bought you stillness. For the first time in years, you have a solid roof over your head and a door that locks from the inside. He was a doctor who publicly burned the canonical texts of ancient medical authorities like Galen and Avicenna, a grand gesture of contempt for the stagnant traditions of university medicine. Paracelsus rejected the classical elements of earth, air, fire, and water, to isolate the soul, to distill the spirit. This is the secret to separating soul from matter. It isn't a miracle, it's a chemical procedure. Distillation, calcination, putrefaction, these aren't just for refining metals. They are the tools for dissecting reality itself. You delve deeper into his wild, mystical worldview. You read about his belief in elementals, the gnomes of the earth, the undines of the water, and his strangely specific instructions for creating a homunculus, a tiny artificial person, by incubating human seed in warm horse manure for 40 weeks. It's a fringe theory, even for your time, but it doesn't deter you. It only confirms that Paracelsus was a man who saw no limits. He has given you the theoretical framework. The soul is sulfur. The spirit is mercury. Now, all you have to do is find a way to cook them out of the salt of the body. Instead, he proposed the tria prima, the three primal substances that constitute all of reality. There is mercury, the principle of spirit, the volatile, transformative life force. There is sulfur, the principle of soul, the inflammable, connecting oil that binds spirit to body. And there is salt, the principle of body, the stable, physical vessel that gives form to the other two. Everything, from a mountain to a man, is a unique combination of these three. Scholars still debate whether Paracelsus saw his three primes as literal chemical substances or as philosophical archetypes. For you, sitting in your lamp-lit room, this is not an academic question. It is a recipe. He saw the cosmos not as a matter of four humors and abstract qualities, but as a vast, divine chemical process. To him, a human body was a microcosm of the universe, and illness was a chemical imbalance that could be corrected with chemical cures. He was the father of the iatrochemistry that you championed back at Gießen. In this blessed quiet, you finally unpack the precious, heavily thumbed books that have been your only constant companions. Among them is your most treasured and dangerous volume, a collection of writings by the man who has become your posthumous mentor, Theophrastus von Hohenheim, who gave himself the magnificent, impossibly arrogant name, Paracelsus. To call yourself Paracelsus meant you considered yourself superior to Celsus, a renowned Roman physician from antiquity. It's the 16th century equivalent of a musician calling themselves better than Beethoven. As you pore over the dense, cryptic German and Latin, you feel a jolt of kinship. Paracelsus was a rebel, just like you. It is in his work that you find the key you have been searching for. If a human being is made of salt, sulfur, and mercury, then it must be possible to separate them. The theory is intoxicating, a perfect, elegant system on the page. Now comes the messy part, putting Paracelsus into practice. If the body is salt, the soul is sulfur, and the spirit is mercury, then you need a body to work with. You're not yet ready or reckless enough to use a human one. So you turn to the animal kingdom. You begin to collect your raw materials, and it's not a pleasant shopping trip. Other researchers of your time were engaged in similar, if less philosophically ambitious, pursuits. Just a few years after your birth, a fellow German alchemist named Hennig Brand had discovered the element phosphorus while boiling down vast quantities of urine, hoping to find the philosopher's stone. You are all fumbling in the same dark room, occasionally grabbing hold of something real. Historians still debate whether your initial goal was a universal medicine, or if you were specifically hunting for a component of the elixir of life from the very start. To you, in this moment, there is no difference. You look at the foul, dark liquid. This isn't waste. This is a panacea. It's concentrated life force, an oil that can rebalance the chemistry of any sick body. You have created a miracle, even if it smells like the devil's own cologne. You procure a gruesome assortment of animal parts from butchers and tanneries. Blood, hair, scraps of leather, and most importantly, bones. Lots and lots of bones. You spend days with a heavy pestle, crushing them into a coarse powder, the rhythmic crunching and cracking a grim percussion in your cellar laboratory. You pack this grisly mixture into a large retort, seal it, and place it in the gentle, constant heat of your Athanor. Your goal is destructive distillation. You want to break the salt of the bone, to torture it with heat until it releases its more volatile essences. A thick, dark, oily substance, almost black with a bluish-green iridescence, begins to condense in the neck of your alembic and drip slowly into the collection flask. It is viscous and foul, the physical embodiment of the horrifying smell that now permanently perfumes your lab. But you don't recoil in disgust. You stare at it with a kind of holy reverence. This, you believe, is it, the raw, vital essence. The sulfur and mercury, the soul and spirit drawn out from their bodily prison. You have successfully separated the subtle from the gross. There's no fume hood, no safety goggles, just a profound, perhaps misplaced, faith in your own constitution. As the days pass, a truly spectacular stench begins to fill your workspace. It's a thick, acrid, suffocating smell of burnt hair, roasting flesh, and something sharply ammoniacal. It's a smell that would make a vulture gag, a miasma so potent you imagine it could be bottled and used to clear out a trench. It clings to your clothes, your hair, your skin. You reek of death and chemistry. After weeks of this slow, stinking cook, you begin to see a result. What you've stumbled upon is a complex chemical mixture. You have your breakthrough, your dark, iridescent oil. But breakthroughs are expensive to maintain. The patron's generosity is not infinite, and your true passion, the quest for the elixir of life, requires a near-endless supply of charcoal, glassware, and rare ingredients. Looking at the flask of foul-smelling liquid, a new, intensely practical thought forms in your mind. This substance may be a stepping stone to immortality, but in the short term, it could be your ticket to financial independence. You decide to take your discovery public. You will sell it. The first marketing challenge is, to put it mildly, the smell. You can't exactly sell it as a fragrant perfume. You lean into its medicinal, almost brutalist nature. You name it with a notable lack of poetic flair, Dippel's animal oil. You decant the thick, black liquid into small, sturdy glass vials, corking them tightly. Then you turn your attention to the sales pitch. You take to the printing press, a technology that was by then widespread and a primary engine of public discourse. You draft pamphlets filled with bold, sweeping claims. This isn't just a remedy, it's a panacea, a cure-all. Does it cure gout? Yes. Hysteria? Absolutely. Epilepsy, of course. The lingering fear of plague? This is your ultimate shield. The sales pitch practically writes itself. Feeling poorly? Why not try this concentrated essence of life I personally tortured out of a pile of bones? You transform from a reclusive philosopher into a traveling salesman. You set up a stall in the bustling market squares of the towns you visit. Surrounded by the shouts of vegetable sellers and the clucking of chickens, you create your own little theater of medicine. You unstopper a vial and let the potent, eye-watering aroma waft over the curious onlookers. A bit of shock and awe to get their attention. Your background as a university-trained debater serves you well. You are articulate, intense, and utterly convincing. You speak of Paracelsian principles, of rebalancing the body's internal chemistry, using language just scientific sounding enough to awe the common person. This was the golden age of patent medicines, a completely unregulated market where any charlatan with a good story could bottle rainwater and sell it as a miracle tonic. You, however, have something you genuinely believe in, and people buy it. They are desperate. In an age where a simple infection could kill, where doctors often did more harm than good with their bleedings and purges, any new hope was worth a few coins. A man with a shaking sickness buys a vial. A woman whose child suffers from fits buys another. Historians still debate whether you truly believed your oil was the universal cure you claimed it to be, or if you saw it as a pragmatic, if slightly cynical, way to fund your more esoteric research. Perhaps you convinced yourself it was true. You watched the coins pile up, the fruits of your smelly labor. The line between alchemist and showman begins to dissolve. You are no longer just a seeker of knowledge. You are a brand. Your new career as a purveyor of Dippel's oil brings you a measure of financial stability and a growing, if controversial, public profile. You are now a familiar figure in many German towns. The intense, wild-eyed doctor with the strange black medicine and even stranger ideas. But with fame comes scrutiny, and with scrutiny comes rumor. Your success doesn't quiet the whispers about you. It amplifies them, twisting them into new and more sinister shapes. People see your success. They smell the lingering chemical tang. That seems to follow you everywhere, and they begin to wonder. They wonder what exactly is in that oil. The rumors start small, in the hushed gossip of taverns and market stalls. You say the oil is made from animal bones and blood. But you are a strange man, a recluse who keeps odd hours. Who has seen these animals? Where do you get your supplies? Your established reputation as a heretic who dabbles in the secrets of life and death provides fertile ground for these suspicions to grow. The public imagination, always hungry for a monster, begins to work on your story. The whispers suggest that perhaps your anatomical studies, which you justify as necessary for your medical research, involve more than just the stray cats and butchered pigs you claim. This is an era where the line between anatomy and sacrilege is perilously thin. The dissection of human corpses was, in fact, a legitimate part of medical education in some universities, but it was highly regulated and often performed as a public spectacle under the watchful eye of the church. For a private individual like you, an unlicensed and condemned philosopher, to be engaged in such work would be unthinkable. It would be a crime not just against the state, but against God. And so, the rumors take a darker turn. People start connecting your known obsession with the mechanics of the soul with the city's unfortunate realities. An unexplainable death, a freshly disturbed grave in the churchyard suddenly. These mundane tragedies are viewed through the lens of your work. Scholars debate the extent to which you were aware of these specific, ghoulish rumors. Were you oblivious, lost in your work, or did you hear the whispers and choose to ignore them, perhaps even cultivating an air of dangerous mystery? It's hard to say. What is certain is that your public persona becomes increasingly sinister. You are no longer just the crank who sells smelly oil. You are the man who seeks to trap souls in jars, the philosopher who has no respect for the boundary between the living and the dead. A quirky but true detail from the period is the existence of resurrection men, body snatchers who illegally exhumed fresh corpses to sell to private anatomy schools. The public was well aware of this grim trade, and it would have been easy to imagine you as one of their prime customers. You press on with your work, possibly dismissing the gossip as the price of genius. But the stories have a life of their own. They detach from reality and become a kind of dark folklore. You are becoming a local boogeyman, a cautionary tale whispered to children. The shadows in your cellar laboratory are no longer just shadows. In the public mind, they are filled with unspeakable things. Your quest for eternal life is starting to look to the outside world like a terrifying obsession with death. The weight of the rumors becomes a physical burden, a cloak of suspicion you can't shrug off. When even your customers start looking at you with more fear than hope, you know it's time to move on again. Driven by a strange homeward impulse, you find yourself traveling back toward the dark forests and rolling hills of Hesse, the landscape of your birth. You don't return to the castle itself, but you settle in the shadow of its hill, a place where the name Dippel and the name Frankenstein are inextricably linked. It's like returning to your hometown, only to discover you're the star of a new, extremely unflattering urban legend. You expect a degree of familiarity, perhaps even a grudging respect for a local boy who has made a name for himself, however strange. Instead, you find something far more bizarre. Your personal infamy has collided with the region's ancient folklore, creating a monstrous hybrid. The old stories are still here, the ones you grew up with, about the dragon-slaying knight Sir Arbogast, but now they have a new, horrifying chapter, and you are its main character. The locals, who once whispered about a dragon's corrosive blood, now whisper about you. They blend the tales of your chemical experiments and your theological heresies with their own deep-rooted fears. A quirky local legend, which you might have dismissed as a child, was that the hill on which Castle Frankenstein stands is magnetic. One of the magnetic mountains of lore, said to possess strange powers over nature. Now, the locals decide this magnetic power is what fuels your dark arts. The stories about your animal oil, already unsettling, have mutated. They're no longer saying you're using dead animals. They're saying you're trying to bring them back to life. Then they stop talking about animals altogether. Your interest in anatomy, your heretical talk of transferring souls, it all gets churned in the rumor mill and comes out as one terrifying, electrifying concept: reanimation. Historians still argue whether you consciously played into these myths, or were merely an unfortunate victim of them. Did you cultivate the dark persona for protection, or did you find yourself trapped inside a story you didn't write? Either way, it happens. The fears about grave robbing merge with your alchemical work. The local imagination pictures you in your laboratory, not just distilling bones, but stitching together parts, trying to spark a man-made life into existence with lightning drawn from the magnetic mountain. It's amazing brand synergy, really. Just not the kind that helps sell a health tonic. The dragon story seems almost quaint by comparison. At least the dragon had the decency to stay dead. You are no longer just Johann Conrad Dippel, the heretic alchemist. Here, in the shadow of your ancestral home, you have become something more. You have become the monster of the castle, a modern-day Prometheus whose name is used to frighten children into obedience. The legend of Frankenstein's monster is taking its first shambling steps, not in a novel, but in the fearful fireside tales of German peasants, decades before Mary Shelley would ever pick up a pen. The Frankenstein legend is a heavy shroud. Being a local boogeyman is not only bad for business, it's an existential threat. You decide that the only way to escape a story that powerful is to find a patron so mighty that the whispers of peasants can't reach his ears. You need to trade the dark forest for a gilded court. You set your sights higher than ever before, aiming for a true monarch, a king or an elector whose ambition is as boundless as your own. This is not another hunt for a curious duke. This is a gamble for the ultimate prize. After weeks of careful maneuvering, using every contact, and burning every favor, you are granted an audience. You walk across floors so polished you can see your own worn-out reflection. The air is warm and smells of imported citrus and power. The man on the throne is draped in velvet and wears enough medals to sink a small boat, a testament to either his valor or the sycophancy of his court. He watches you approach with an expression of profound boredom. He has seen 100 men like you, promising miracles. Your challenge is to be the one he remembers. You bypass the pleasantries and the modest claims. You don't even mention your Animal oil at first. You go straight for the two things a monarch truly understands: gold and time. Your Majesty, you begin, your voice steady and intense. The alchemical arts are not for making trinkets. They are for the foundation of empires. You promise him wealth beyond the dreams of his accountants. You don't just talk about transmutation. You give him a number. You propose a contract, give you a fully equipped laboratory and 1 year, and you will transmute 1,000 pounds of lead into pure, untarnishable gold. As a flourish, you add a quirky theatrical extra. You point to a large ruby on his finger, and as a demonstration of the lesser arts, you say, "I can create a tincture that will cause your Majesty's gemstones to grow, doubling their size and luster within a month." It's a fantastic, almost laughable claim, but it's visual, it's magic, and it's a lot more palatable than your rumored hobbies back in Hesse. Then you play your final card: longevity. You speak of your oil not as a cure for common ailments, but as the first step toward the true elixir of life, a medicine to strengthen his body and prolong his reign for decades. The king listens, his boredom slowly replaced by a shrewd, calculating interest. Historians still argue whether these powerful, often ruthless rulers genuinely believed in the possibility of transmutation, or if they simply saw alchemists as a high-risk research and development department from which a practical discovery like the invention of European porcelain, which came from a similar royal alchemical gamble, might unexpectedly emerge. The king's face is unreadable. Is he imagining a treasury overflowing with gold, or is he calculating the cost of your execution if you fail? He agrees. He agrees to everything: the laboratory, the funding, the absolute secrecy. But his agreement comes with a cold, unspoken counteroffer. You will be given a palace, but it will also be your prison. You will have everything you need to succeed and no opportunity to escape if you fail. You have won your spectacular gamble. As you are led away by the guards to your new, luxurious prison, you feel a thrill of pure, terrifying triumph. You have the king's patronage. Now all you have to do is deliver a miracle. Your new laboratory is magnificent, a cavernous space filled with everything an alchemist could dream of. The furnaces are custom built. The glassware is Venetian and flawless, and rare ingredients arrive by the crate load. It is a gilded cage, but for a while you feel like the luckiest bird in the world. The king leaves you to your work, the pressure mounting with each passing day. You toil endlessly, repeating experiments, consulting. Your charts, convinced you, are on the precipice of a breakthrough. You try to coax the ruby on a ring the king gave you to grow. Turns out, you can't just tell a gemstone to grow, even if you ask very nicely and use Paracelsian terminology. The lead, despite being subjected to every process in your arsenal calcination, dissolution, putrefaction, remains stubbornly, insultingly, lead. The year is up. You are summoned before the king. There is no boredom on his face this time, only a cold, hard expectation. You have no gold. You have no giant rubies. You have nothing but complex excuses and frantic promises that you are this close. He is not interested. Your gamble has failed. He doesn't execute you. That would be admitting he was duped by a common charlatan. Instead, he simply has you thrown out, stripped of your fine laboratory and your last shred of credibility among the powerful. You are back on the road, but worse off than before. You are no longer just a heretic. You are a proven fraud. Your wandering takes you north into the kingdom of Denmark. Perhaps you hope for a fresh start, a place where news of your recent spectacular failure has not yet arrived. You continue to sell your oil, to gather small circles of followers, but your old fire is tempered with a new bitterness. And you cannot stay quiet. Your rebellious theological ideas, which have been simmering for years, now boil over. You engage in a furious public dispute with the Danish court clergy, publishing pamphlets that attack the established Lutheran Church with a venom that shocks even your supporters. You accuse them of being servants of state, not God. One of your fringe theological claims from this period is that true piety isn't about church attendance, but about an inner, personal, chemical process of the heart to purify the soul. Concept the institutional church found both nonsensical and deeply insulting. This is the final straw. Your enemies are now numerous and powerful. You have angered the scientific establishment, the financial backers you swindled, and now a national church. Historians still argue whether your imprisonment was primarily for your theological heresies or because your failed financial schemes had made powerful enemies who wanted you silenced. The truth is likely that they formed a perfect storm of condemnation. In 1719, you are arrested. There is no grand trial, no public debate. The Danish authorities have had enough of you. You are declared a dangerous element and sentenced to imprisonment. You are transported under heavy guard to the island of Bornholm, a rugged piece of land in the Baltic Sea that the Danish crown frequently used as a state prison. It's the 18th century. Alcatraz. You are marched into a fortress and then down into a stone cell. The iron door slams shut, the sound of final, definitive clang of failure. The menu shifts dramatically from the roasted swan of the palace to, well, let's just say it's mostly brown and unidentifiable. There is no laboratory here, no furnace, no audience to captivate. There is only stone, silence, and the slow, agonizing passage of time. The sentence is for 7 years. The first year in your Danish cell is a slow-motion agony of deprivation. The silence is the loudest thing you've ever heard, broken only by the rhythmic crash of waves against the island's cliffs and the shuffling feet of your jailer. Is no fire, only a relentless seeping cold that the thin wool blanket does little to repel. Your hands, so accustomed to the delicate work of adjusting a flame or holding a glass flask, now have nothing to do but clench and unclench in the damp air. Everything has been taken from you, your books, your instruments, your freedom. Your entire world, once a universe of bubbling retorts and fiery transformations, has shrunk to the dimensions of this 6 by 9 foot stone box. It's the ultimate timeout, and the warden doesn't seem like the type to reduce the sentence for good behavior, but a mind like yours cannot be still. Stripped of all your physical tools, you begin to turn your alchemical process inward. The cell becomes your athanor. Your mind becomes the sealed flask. And the raw, unrefined prima materia you must now work on is your own chaotic lifetime of beliefs, failures, and radical ideas. You have no lead to transmute into gold, so you will try to transmute your own suffering into wisdom. You have no bones to distill into a vital essence, so you will try to distill the essence of your own soul. It is an alchemy of the mind, a desperate pivot from the physical to the metaphysical. You beg and barter for paper and a quill, trading what little you have for the tools of a different kind of experiment. Slowly, painstakingly, you begin to write. You pour all your frustrated energy, all your defiant theology, onto the page. The work is your salvation, a way to structure the endless, undifferentiated days. You revisit the ideas that got you into this mess in the first place, but now, with nothing but time to think, you refine them, you systematize them. You are writing the great works that will become your true legacy. Treatises like Vera Demonstratio Evangelica, the true demonstration of the evangelical. You are, in essence, creating your own religion. It's a radical offshoot of pietism, a major historical movement at the time that sought to replace rigid Lutheran dogma with a focus on personal, heartfelt faith. But you take it to a wild extreme. You argue that salvation is not a matter of belief, but a tangible psychochemical process. A chemical process of the heart, where the soul must be purified by a kind of spiritual fire, a quirky centerpiece. Of your new philosophy is the assertion that the Bible is not a literal text, but an alchemical instruction manual, written in a divine code that only you, with your unique understanding of Paracelsian principles, can decipher. Historians still argue whether this period of forced reflection represented a genuine spiritual awakening, turning you from a physical alchemist to a mystical philosopher, or if it was simply a desperate rebranding by a man whose career in gold-making and miracle cures had spectacularly imploded. Perhaps it was both. In the crushing silence of your cell, the quest for the physical elixir of life, the one you drink, evolves into a quest for a spiritual immortality, one you achieve through divine understanding. The 7 years crawl by. You fill hundreds of pages. You are no longer the same man who was thrown into this cell. You have been calcined in solitude, dissolved in failure, and are now coagulating into something new. The year is 1726. The iron door of your cell groans open, not for a meager meal, but for the last time. Your 7-year sentence is complete. You walk out of the Bornholm fortress, blinking in the harsh Baltic sunlight, a man carved hollow by solitude. You are 53 years old, an age that in the 18th century often meant you were already living on borrowed time. Your joints ache with a permanent dampness, and your eyes, accustomed to the dim light of your cell, are weak. You are free, but you are stepping into a world that has moved on without you. You make your way back south, a ghost returning to a land that has half forgotten him. The intellectual landscape has shifted. While you were locked away, refining your mystical theology, the first sparks of the Enlightenment were catching fire across Europe. A new generation of thinkers is rising, men who champion reason, empirical evidence, and a deep skepticism of the very kind of mystical, revelation-based knowledge that you now hold most dear. Your ideas, which were radical and dangerous when you went into prison, now just seem odd, antiquated. The world isn't arguing about transmuting souls anymore. They're starting to argue about the rights of man and the nature of government. It's like you spent 7 years perfecting a masterful silent film, only to be released into a world that has just discovered sound. Your reputation has also curdled over time. The memory of your spectacular failures in gold-making has endured far better than the memory of your early brilliance. The Frankenstein legends around your birthplace have only grown more elaborate in your absence. And your newly written philosophical works, which you see as the pinnacle of your life's thinking, are met with a mixture of confusion and ridicule. The Church condemns them as heresy, no surprise there, but the new, rationalist thinkers dismiss them as unscientific nonsense. You find yourself trapped in a no-man's land, too mystical for the scientists and too scientific for the mystics. You try to find a new patron, but the courts that were once intrigued by your alchemical promises now see you as a relic. You have no new tricks, no dazzling demonstrations. All you have are stacks of manuscripts filled with dense, impenetrable prose about the spiritual chemistry of salvation. A quirky but poignant historical fact is that many alchemists in this transitional period tried to rebrand themselves as chemists, dropping the mystical baggage to fit in with the new scientific paradigm. You are either unable or unwilling to make that compromise. You double down on your own unique, bizarre synthesis of alchemy, medicine, and theology. Historians still debate whether your post-prison life was a tragedy of a man out of time, or the stubborn, noble last stand of a dying worldview. You wander from town to town, a relic of a bygone age. The crowds no longer gather. The students no longer seek you out. You are a living anachronism, a man whose fierce intelligence is now aimed at questions the world is no longer asking. The freedom you longed for in your cell turns out to be just another kind of isolation, the cold solitude of being utterly and completely misunderstood. Years of wandering in the intellectual wilderness have worn you down. Your radical theology has found few converts, and your animal oil, while still providing a meager income, is no longer a sensation. You are old, you are tired, and you are nearly broke. A fire of your ambition, which once burned so fiercely, has dwindled to a low, stubborn ember. But in that ember, one last desperate gamble begins to glow. You need to get back in the game to secure one final patronage that will allow you to work in peace. And there's only one promise spectacular enough to make anyone listen to a washed-up, 70-year-old alchemist. Gold. You travel to Sweden, a kingdom with a long history of mining and metallurgy, and therefore a long history of interest in anyone who claimed they could make the process more profitable. You managed to secure an audience at the court, a feat that speaks to your enduring, if tarnished, reputation. You stand before a new set of powerful, skeptical faces. You know you can't rely on the old charm and fiery rhetoric alone. You need a demonstration. The court is wary, aware of your past failures, but the promise of transmutation, the ultimate financial cheat code, is still too alluring to dismiss completely. They agree to a trial. It's not a grand year-long contract like before, but a single high-stakes experiment. You are given a small laboratory, a quantity of lead, and a committee of grim-faced officials to observe your every move. The swindle, if that's what it is, needs to be your masterpiece. You can no longer rely on vague promises. You have to produce something that looks, feels, and weighs like gold. A strange but documented practice among fraudulent alchemists was the use of a hollow stirring rod. The rod would be packed with real gold dust and sealed with wax. When dipped into the hot, molten lead, the wax would melt, releasing the gold and creating the illusion of a successful transmutation. You lock yourself away, preparing for the great demonstration. The air in the laboratory crackles with tension. You are a cornered animal, summoning every trick and every scrap of knowledge you possess. The day of the demonstration arrives. The observers file in, their faces impassive masks of skepticism. You begin the process, your hands moving with the practiced grace of a lifetime spent over the furnace. You heat the lead in a crucible until it glows, a shimmering pool of liquid metal. You add powders and chemicals, muttering incantations that are part chemistry, part prayer. The observers watch, silent and unblinking. A critical moment comes. You perform your final additions, your final stirrings. You allow the crucible to cool. All eyes are on the dull gray lump of metal. Has the base lead been perfected? Has the sickness of its nature been cured? Historians still debate the exact method you used in this infamous attempt. Did you use a trick like the hollow rod? Or did you genuinely believe that this time, with your refined understanding, you would finally succeed? Whatever your plan, the outcome will seal your fate. You break open the cooled metal. The court officials lean in, their sharp eyes ready to catch any hint of deception, any trace of the yellow gleam that would change the fortunes of a kingdom and of your own desperate life. With a small hammer, you tap the side of the cooled crucible. A sharp crack runs through the clay. The observers lean closer, their breath held. You break it open. Inside sits a lump of metal. It is not the warm, buttery, divine gleam of gold. It is gray. It is dull. It is cracked and impure, somehow looking even more base and pathetic than the lead you started with. Spoiler alert. It's not gold. It's not even trying to be gold. It's the metallurgical equivalent of a shrug. A profound, soul-crushing silence fills the laboratory, a quiet so deep you can hear the frantic, useless beating of your own heart. Your masterpiece of deception or delusion has failed. It has failed utterly, completely, and spectacularly. The head of the Swedish committee, a man whose family has managed the royal mines for generations, picks up the lump with a pair of tongs. He doesn't need to perform any complex tests. He is an assayer, a professional whose entire life is dedicated to distinguishing valuable metal from dross. This was a core part of the statecraft of kingdoms like Sweden, whose economy relied heavily on its copper and silver mines. An expert assayer could tell the purity of a metal with astonishing accuracy using simple tools and a trained eye. He glances at the lump, then at you. He doesn't even have the decency to look angry. He just looks tired. It's the bureaucratic, "I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed" look, which is somehow infinitely worse than rage. He sets the lump down with a dull thud, the sound of a closing coffin. The swindle is over. There is no shouting, no dramatic arrest. Your humiliation is quiet, clinical, and absolute. You are escorted from the laboratory, through the palace halls, and politely but firmly shown the door. A small, heavy purse is pressed into your hand, not a reward, but travel money, a final, insulting severance package. You are given what amounts to an 18th century restraining order against the entire kingdom of Sweden. As you walk away, the weight of this final public failure settles on you. This is not like the other times. You are old now. There will be no more fresh starts, no more credulous patrons. Historians still argue about this moment, debating whether you are a genuine, if deluded, believer in your own abilities, making one last, desperate attempt at the great work, or if this was a conscious, calculated fraud by a man with nothing left to lose. In the end, it doesn't matter. The result is the same. Your name is now permanently synonymous with failure. Cast out and disgraced, you drift aimlessly for a time, the roads of Europe now feeling less like paths to opportunity and more like the circles of your own personal hell. But an unexpected offer of sanctuary comes, not from a king, but from the Counts of St. Wittgenstein, distant relations who offer you asylum out of a sense of familial duty, or perhaps just pity. They offer you rooms in their sprawling, peaceful residence, Castle Wittgenstein. It is not a laboratory or a prison. It is a place of retirement, a quiet, stately home in the German countryside where you can live out your final years, a place to fade away. You arrive at Castle Wittgenstein, a broken man. The castle is not a grim fortress like your birthplace, but a sprawling, elegant schloss, more palace than stronghold, nestled in the gentle hills of Westphalia. Your distant cousins, the counts, receive you with a quiet, dignified compassion. They give you a comfortable suite of rooms, a place at their table, and an unspoken agreement to never, ever mention the words gold or Sweden. For the first time in decades, there is no pressure, no patron to please, no clergy to fight, no mob to flee. There is only the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall and the changing of the seasons outside your window. But peace is a foreign country, and you are not a good tourist. The quiet that should be a comfort is instead a canvas for your regrets. The face of every failed patron, the echo of every slammed door, the profound silence of that Swedish laboratory, they are the ghosts that haunt your waking hours. There is a new, more intimate enemy now, one you cannot outrun, your own body. You are in your 70s. A persistent cough rattles your chest. A sharp pain in your joints makes climbing the grand staircase an epic trial. Your hands, once steady enough for the most delicate alchemical procedure, now tremble uncontrollably. The irony is not lost on you. You, Johann Conrad Dippel, the man who peddled a panacea and chased eternal life, are dying. And you are dying in the most banal, ordinary way imaginable. Not in a magical explosion or by drinking a flawed potion, but by the slow, grinding decay of old age. The quest for the elixir of life is no longer a grand philosophical pursuit. It's a frantic, deeply personal race against your own mortality. Your body has become the ultimate ticking clock. You managed to set up a small makeshift laboratory in one of your rooms. No more grand Athenors or dreams of industrial-scale transmutation. This is a small personal setup, funded by what little money you have left from selling your oil. You return to your first love, your dark, smelly discovery, Dippel's oil. You must believe, that the secret to the elixir is hidden within it. Its concentrated life force, you tell yourself, it just needs to be purified, perfected. A fascinating but grim tidbit from medical history is the concept of mummy, a medicinal powder made from ground-up Egyptian mummies, which was a real and widely used substance believed to have powerful healing properties. Your obsession with a medicine derived from dead matter was part of a long, if macabre, tradition. Your days become a feverish routine. You wake, you tend to your small furnace, you distill and redistill your oil, trying endless variations. You are hunting for the final missing ingredient, the one perfect process that will elevate it from a crude remedy to the true elixir. Historians still argue whether, at this late stage, you are driven by genuine hope or by a desperate refusal to accept the failure of your life's work. The nights are long. You pore over your old texts from Paracelsus, your own prison writings, searching for a clue you missed, a symbol you misinterpreted. The world outside your window, the peaceful life of the castle, the changing leaves might as well not exist. You are racing against the dying of your own light, locked in a final, desperate struggle with the one enemy no alchemist has ever defeated. The final winter of your life settles over Castle Wittgenstein. The world outside your window is bleached of color, frozen and still. Inside, your laboratory is a scene of controlled chaos. Every surface is cluttered with flasks, retorts, and hastily scrawled notes. The air is thick with the familiar acrid smell of your work, a scent now mingled with the musty odor of old age and sickness. The trembling in your hands has grown worse, making the delicate work of measuring and mixing a daily struggle against your own physical decay, with a certainty that chills you more than the winter air, that you do not have much time. This is it. This is your last chance. You decide to stake everything on one final, monumental experiment. This will not be a tentative trial or a minor variation. This will be the culmination of your entire life's work, the synthesis of everything you have ever learned, from the forbidden books of your youth to the mystical insights of your prison cell. You are going to create the definitive version of your elixir, the grand elixir, and you will use every last resource, every last ounce of your failing strength to do it. You are going all in, like a desperate gambler pushing his last stack of chips to the center of the table. The process begins with the raw material you know best, bones. Not just any bones this time. You seek out the freshest you can find, believing them to contain the most potent vital force. You spend days laboriously pulverizing them, your wheezing breaths echoing in the small room. You are a gaunt, stooped figure, covered in bone dust, looking more like a ghoul than a philosopher. You load the material into your largest retort, beginning the slow, stinking process of distillation that first gave you your famous oil. This is the foundation, the salt from which all else will be drawn. But this time, you add new, esoteric ingredients based on your lifetime of research. You add small amounts of metallic antimony, which alchemists called the gray wolf because of its ability to devour other metals, believing it would purify your mixture. You add distilled wine spirits, what you call the vegetable mercury, hoping its essence will harmonize with the animal mercury you are cooking out of the bones. A truly quirky but historically documented alchemical practice was the addition of precious stones to elixirs. Following this tradition, you crush a small pearl all you can afford and add the powder to the flask, believing its lunar perfection will add a celestial grace to the concoction. For weeks, you barely sleep. You watch the furnace with a feverish intensity, maintaining the heat with an almost parental devotion. The process is a microcosm of your life, slow, smelly, filled with frustrating setbacks, and tiny glimmers of hope. You distill and redistill the resulting oil, passing it through a complex series of filters and rectifications, each step designed to separate the subtle from the gross with more precision than ever before. Historians still debate the precise recipe you are attempting to follow, as your final notes are a chaotic scroll of symbols and cryptic abbreviations. It's a formula known only to you. Slowly, drop by precious drop, a new liquid begins to collect in your final flask. It is not the familiar dark, sludgy oil. This liquid is clearer, with a pale golden hue. It seems to shimmer with its own inner light. It is beautiful. It is perfect. You believe you have finally done it. The final drop falls. A fire in the furnace dies down, its work complete. Silence returns to your small laboratory, a silence that feels different, heavy with anticipation, pregnant with possibility. On your workbench sits a single, small flask. Inside is the pale, golden liquid, the result of your last great experiment. It catches the weak winter light and refracts it into 100 tiny rainbows. It looks like liquid sunlight. After a lifetime of producing a foul, black, stinking oil, the sheer beauty of this creation feels like proof enough of its divinity. You spend a full day in quiet contemplation. You clean your laboratory, arranging your tools with a neatness you haven't bothered with in years. You wash yourself and put on your best remaining clothes. This is not a scientific experiment anymore. It is a sacrament. You are preparing to meet your Creator, either by dying and going to Him, or by becoming a god yourself. You are about to consume what you believe, with every fiber of your being, is the true elixir of life, the philosopher's stone in liquid. Formed out as twilight falls, casting long, soft shadows across the room, you light a single candle. You take the flask in your trembling hand. It feels warm to the touch, or perhaps that's just the feverish heat of your own skin. You unstopper the vial. The aroma that wafts out is not the hellish stench of your old oil. It has a strange, sharp, ethereal scent, something like ozone after a lightning strike, mixed with a faint, sweet perfume you can't quite identify. A peculiar tidbit from alchemical lore is the idea that the elixir would taste of sweet fire, a pleasant warmth that would spread through the body without burning. You are hoping for that sweet fire. You sit for a long moment, the flask held before you, a lifetime of ambition, of study, of failure and defiance, all concentrated into this single luminous dose. You think of the castle of your birth, of the university halls, of the dungeons of Bornholm, of the glittering, deceitful courts. It has all led to this. There is no more research to be done, no more texts to consult. The great work is finished. Historians, of course, can only speculate on what was truly in that flask, a cocktail of complex organic compounds, esters, and perhaps some toxic heavy metals from the antimony. To you, it is hope. It is immortality dot with a final whispered prayer to God, to Paracelsus, to Hermes Trismegistus himself. You raise the flask to your lips. You close your eyes and you drink. The liquid is cool on your tongue, and the strange, sharp taste floods your senses. You swallow it down, a single, decisive gulp. Then you set the empty flask down on the workbench, fold your hands in your lap, and wait. You wait for the magic to begin. You wait for the divine fire to course through your veins, to burn away the sickness, to smooth the wrinkles from your skin, and to turn back the relentless, unforgiving clock of time. You wait. The candle flame sputters, a tiny golden dancer in the growing dark. You focus on your own body, listening for the first sign of the miracle. You are waiting for the sweet fire, the warm surge of vitality, the great chemical rebirth. A minute passes, then another. There is a sensation, a sour, acidic churning in your stomach. A wave of nausea rises in your throat. This is not the divine fire of Paracelsus. This is the familiar, wretched fire of indigestion. A cold dread begins to creep into the edges of your triumphant certainty. Perhaps the elixir takes time to work, you tell yourself. It must first battle the deeply entrenched decay of 70 years. It is a war, not a simple transformation. You wait, your hands clenched so tightly, your knuckles are white. You try to meditate on the alchemical symbols, to align your spiritual state with the physical process. But the only thing you feel is a gurgling in your gut and a growing tightness in your chest. The cough that has plagued you for months suddenly returns. A dry, racking spasm that shakes your entire frame. The hours crawl by. The candle burns low, its light now a weak, struggling flicker. The beautiful golden elixir, the culmination of your life's magnificent obsession, has done nothing. No, that's not true. It has done something. It has made you feel slightly sick. The crushing weight of the truth begins to settle upon you, a physical pressure that seems heavier than the castle itself. It wasn't the final missing ingredient. It wasn't the secret purification. It wasn't the grand elixir. It was just another failed experiment. The most beautiful, the most promising, and the most heartbreaking failure of them all. There is no more room for self-deception, no more energy for another theory. There is only the cold, hard, inescapable reality. You are a mortal man. You are old and sick, and you are going to die. A strange, bitter laugh escapes your lips, a sound that is half sob, half gasp. You, who lectured kings and debated with the greatest theological minds, who claimed to hold the secrets of life and death, have been defeated by a simple, universal banality. A quirky fringe belief held by some late-period alchemists was that a failed elixir could actually accelerate the aging process, a cruel karmic punishment for hubris. As you feel another wave of weakness wash over you, you might fleetingly, terrifyingly, wonder if this is true. Historians still debate the final cause of your death. Was it a stroke? Heart failure? Or did the final potion, your supposed elixir, contain some acutely toxic substance that delivered the final blow? We will never know. But in that silent, cluttered room, you know your end is near. You look at the empty flask on the workbench. It is no longer a symbol of hope. It is a monument to a magnificent, beautiful, and utterly wrong idea. Your quest has not led to eternal life, but to this, a small dark room, a sputtering candle, and the bitter, bitter taste of your own mortality. The last of the candle's wax is consumed, and the flame gives one final, theatrical flicker before surrendering to the darkness. Your small laboratory is plunged into a profound velvety black, a darkness broken only by the faint silver of moonlight, filtering through the tall window. The only sound is the ragged rhythm of your own breathing, each breath a little shallower, a little more difficult than the last. The wave of nausea has passed, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion, a sense of finality that is almost peaceful. The frantic race is over. You have lost. You remain in your chair, a still silhouette in the moonlit room. Your mind, which, for so long has been a whirlwind of complex theories and desperate hopes, begins to quiet down. The grand philosophical questions fade away, replaced by smaller, more tangible sensations. The rough texture of your woolen coat against your cheek. The persistent, damp cold seeping up from the stone floor. The lingering scent of ozone and failure from your empty flask. You are no longer Johann Conrad Dippel, the great alchemist. You are just an old man in a dark room, at the very end of his story. A servant finds you the next morning. Concerned by your uncharacteristic silence, he knocks on your door, and when there is no answer, he cautiously pushes it open. He finds you just as you were, sitting upright in your chair, your head slumped slightly to one side, as if you have simply fallen asleep while contemplating your work. The first rays of the morning sun stream into the room, illuminating the chaotic but orderly clutter of your life's final obsession. The empty flask sits on the workbench, catching the light, looking for all the world like an ordinary piece of glassware. The date is April 25th, 1734. You are dead. The official cause of death is listed as a stroke, a convenient and plausible explanation. No one mentions the elixir. Your passing is a quiet affair. There is no state funeral, no grand eulogy. You are buried without ceremony in a simple grave near the castle. It is a quiet and mysterious end for a man who lived such a loud and tumultuous life. One of the lingering, quirky questions about your death is the fate of your final notebook, the one containing the recipe for your golden elixir. Did one of the Wittgenstein family keep it as a curiosity, or was it simply burned along with the rest of your alchemical rubbish? No one knows. Historians still debate the final moments of your consciousness. Did you die in despair, crushed by the weight of your ultimate failure? Or did you, in those last silent hours, find some kind of peace, a final acceptance of the natural order you had fought so hard to overcome? We can't know what was in your heart, but we can see the scene you left behind. A laboratory filled with the tools of a magnificent ambition, an empty flask, and a still figure, finally at rest, surrounded by the silent testament to a life spent chasing an impossible, beautiful dream. Your body, the subject of your life's greatest experiment, has finally given its conclusive, unanswerable result. Your earthly story ends in that quiet room in Castle Wittgenstein. For a time, it seems your legacy will be a minor one. Your radical, theological writings are read by a small circle of pietist dissenters, influencing a few fringe religious movements before fading into obscurity. Your animal oil continues to be sold for a while as a folk remedy, a footnote in the history of pharmacology, recognized by later chemists as a crude form of bone char and nitrogenous compounds. You are a historical curiosity, a failed alchemist, one of many who chased the wind. But your story wasn't over. It was simply dormant, waiting to be reanimated in a form you could never have imagined almost a century after your death. On a stormy night in 1816 at the Villa Diodati in Switzerland, a group of young English writers, including Lord Byron, Percy Bysshe Shelley, and his 18-year-old partner, Mary Godwin, decided to pass the time by writing ghost stories. This famous literary event, born of a year without a summer, caused by a volcanic eruption, would give birth to a legend that would eclipse your own 1,000 times over. Mary struggled for an idea until one night she had a waking nightmare, a hideous phantasm of a man who, through some powerful engine, galvanizes a corpse into life. The story she began to write was titled Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus. How did your ghost travel from the forests of Hesse to a Swiss villa? The connection is a tantalizing piece of literary detective work. In 1814, 2 years before the Ghost Story Contest, Mary and Percy traveled down the Rhine River, a journey that took them within just a few miles of your birthplace, Castle Frankenstein. It is almost certain that they, like countless other travelers, would have heard the local legends, the dark, delicious tales of the mad alchemist who lived in the castle, who performed unholy experiments on the dead, who tried to create life. The name itself, Frankenstein, was too perfect to ignore. Historians still debate the extent of your direct influence, as Mary Shelley never mentioned you by name in her journals or letters. The parallels, however, are undeniable. The brilliant, obsessive, and socially isolated scientist who transgresses. The boundaries between life and death. The quest for the secret of creation. The ghoulish work with the component parts of once living things. You were the real-life raw material, the prima materia from which she fashioned her fictional doctor. A quirky footnote to this tale is that the popularization of you as the real Frankenstein is a relatively modern phenomenon, largely kicked off by the work of literary scholar Radu Florescu in the 1970s. The legend fed the novel, and then the novel in turn fed a new, more potent legend about you. And so you found the immortality you were looking for. Not in a golden elixir, but in the ink of a teenage girl's nightmare. You are not remembered as a theologian or a chemist. You are the whisper behind the myth. You achieved eternal life not as a man, but as a monster's shadow, a strange and enduring ghost in the machine of modern horror. Your greatest experiment wasn't the one that ended in that quiet German castle. It was the one that began on a stormy night in Switzerland, an experiment that continues to this day. Every time someone opens that famous book and shivers at the story of the man who dared to play God, the fire in your laboratory has long since gone out, its last embers fading into the cold dust of history. The whispers of your strange and driven life have softened, becoming just another echo in the ancient stones of the castle, a story that now drifts away on the night air, mingling with the rustle of leaves in the dark German forest you once called home. Your frantic search for life has ended, and all that remains is the deep, profound, and final quiet of your rest. And so the story closes, the book is shut, and the heavy curtain of sleep can now begin to fall, leaving behind the frantic striving of the past for the gentle peace of the present. Let the darkness be a comfort now, a soft blanket that covers all. Let the silence be a balm. There are no more experiments to run, no more elixirs to brew, only the simple, easy rhythm of your own slow breathing as you drift deeper and deeper into the welcoming calm of your own dreams. The journey is over. It is time now to simply rest.